Today we're going to talk about refactoring and how to decide when to refactor or not. That's a difficult question, that's a difficult thing to do, but I'll do my best to give you guys some guidance about when to refactor and when not to. In this video I'll share some guidance around what I look out for, how I think about refactoring, when it makes sense, when it doesn't make sense, what's a good refactor, what's a bad refactor for me. Refactoring can kill projects because when you decide to do a huge one and you're changing a ton of code, it can lead to procrastination, and then you stop working on your project at all and it just goes into the shelf and you never pick it up again. So that's the risk. That's why I think it's good to think about this, because it can actually make you stop working on a project. Let's go into the times when I would recommend you to not refactor, to just avoid it. I would generally say no to all refactor, so all the changes that include changing the language of an application when it's big. If it's like a tiny service that you are just trying to rebuild and you can do it in 2 weeks, go for it. But if it's a whole application and the change is going to take 6 months, a year, 3 years, I would avoid it, especially if you're working professionally for a company. I would not recommend it. It's going to be a huge effort and you're going to end up with a new language where most languages do everything nowadays, unless you have a very, very specific use case, which I highly doubt. 90% of the use cases can be covered by any language. So just think really hard about it. I wouldn't recommend it, but if you have like a super special edge case, go for it or consider it, but otherwise I wouldn't. I would also generally say no to refactors that don't have a clear goal or that will not make a noticeable difference in the project. One example of this is changing column names in databases. For the most part, I keep them the same forever, pretty much, because most of the times, the table has a lot of rows and the migration takes a long time, so you have to kind of think about when deploying database migration that contains a change of column names. You have to change the code throughout in multiple places, so you have to test more thoroughly, and that's hard, so I generally avoid it. There are cases where you should do it, but as a rule of thumb, if I'm kind of like in the middle, I don't do it. I don't change the column names unless I have a strong reason, but I haven't had one so far. Now let's get on to when it's a good idea to refactor. The first example that comes to mind is when the refactor is gonna improve developer experience, and an example of this would be TypeScript. If you're trying to adopt TypeScript, it helps catch bugs, it helps you be more productive, you can see the errors when you're compiling the TypeScript, so that's very helpful. That's actually a good idea, and you should turn some files into TypeScript, spend some time. Obviously, do not do the entire project at once, it's going to take forever, but do it kind of like in parts, in manageable parts, where you can just like do a change, get it merged, do the next change over and over again, and you decide at what pace you want to go. But I think adopting technologies like TypeScript is a good idea. Another good refactoring idea is fixing code that doesn't follow the code base standards. It makes things better, it makes things easier. You kind of expect something and it's always there, you don't have to think about it. Otherwise, if the names are kind of all over the place, you have to like kind of go into each part of the code base and adapt to that specific thing, and like kind of like double check yourself, everything. When there are standards and name conventions and everything is the same, as boring as that looks, it's more useful and easier to handle that. So I would recommend you follow standard practices, like for instance, all the get requests, all the methods that do a get request, they should be named get underscore something, if that's your convention, or fetch underscore something. That's one simple example, but there are many others. So following conventions is generally good. Another example of standards is breaking classes that are too big or complex into smaller ones, into multiple ones. That's generally a good idea because you're going to be able to read it more easily, to clean it, to actually delete one part of the code base and have it not affect everything else. So just like making the code cleaner, generally good. The other one would be make the code more testable. If you can write your code in a way that's testable, where you can write unit tests, that's also great, that's awesome, that's gonna save you time in the long run. Those are usually fast and easy to do. It doesn't take more than a week to actually set up like a class for it to be testable. Obviously it depends. If you're setting up tests for the first time, it's gonna take a long time. But if the setup's already there and there's a class that you haven't tested and you want it to be tested, that usually doesn't take too long. So go for it. That's about it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. This is what I think about refactoring. Obviously not the only way to do it. Not the only opinion out there. You guys have to think about it and think about when it makes sense. Think about your specific scenario. These are just some things that I look out for. If you enjoy the content, it would mean a lot if you subscribe. I'll continue making these videos. I'll see you next Friday, but it helps kind of validate that I'm doing something that's worth it. So thank you. Thank you for watching. Are you refactoring anything? What do you guys think about refactoring? Comment below. Just let me know what you think. When do you refactor? When do you not refactor? It's always nice to hear other new ideas out there.